What are the sort of pain points that you've discovered so far, as now, tens of millions of kids are at home trying to learn something while their parents are also working at home?
Yeah, what a week it's been on so many levels, I think, for everybody. I think the number one thing is what you just mentioned, a large fraction of students who don't have internet connectivity or devices at home. I think this whole crisis has shown that that is not a nice to have, it is a must have, frankly, not just to access things like Khan Academy, but also just to have a social connection with folks in this time of social distancing. So we've been talking to a lot of telecom players, tech companies, philanthropists about what they might be able to do to get devices into homes, open up things like hotspots, get students broadband somehow. So that's step one. There's obviously huge questions around just basic childcare issues, school lunches, et cetera. So there's a lot of complexity there. But even if some of that stuff is worked out, I think all parents are struggling with, how do I structure the day? We're all forced to be homeschooling parents of sorts now, but we didn't have the time to prepare for it. And so that's why, since we last spoke after our last conversation last week, we published these calendars, these schedules for students of different age groups or parents of students of different age groups to say, how can you structure your day? And what is there on Khan Academy? We're free, we're non-commercial, we're not for profit, and other resources that you can make a full school day. And then how can you complement that with other resources, say things like video conferencing, so that students can also get, I guess you say, live or synchronous lessons as well.
Meantime, you've got this debate now going on about what this actually means for our children. It's one thing to get through the day, but when we all go back to work, we go back to school, then is this divide somehow exacerbated? One of our Bloomberg opinion writers on the Bloomberg editorial board, Andreas Kluth, wrote a piece called "Closing Some Schools May Cause Some Kids a Lifetime of Harm," which certainly sounds quite dramatic. And he says in his piece, at some point, whenever the pandemic recedes, these cohorts will rejoin in a classroom, the haves and have-nots, but one group may never catch up again, whereas the other will pull ahead. Do we have to be worried about that?
Yeah, I think we do. The reality is, even if there were no supports, your and my children would get some type of support as schools close. And historically, even summer vacation is a major source of inequity because schools are closed there. And middle class and upper middle class families can get enriching activities for their children, while poor families don't have access to those. So there's always this thing called summer vacation that actually has been a major source of inequity. But there's a very real scenario in which summer vacation this year is not just 2 or 3 months, it might be 5 months. And then there's a very real scenario that as we go back to school, if the virus picks up again as things normalize, that they might have to be shut down again in a moment's notice. And so in this world, that's why I've told the team here at Khan Academy, as a not-for-profit with this goal of free world-class education for anyone, anywhere, we've got to step up. We've got to make sure that people have complete offerings, they know how to structure their days, and it's for sure not going to be the full solution to everything, but hopefully it will help level some of these inequities we have. I can't claim that we'll be able to solve it, but these are the exact questions we have to ask ourselves.
Now, I've used some of the Khan Academy schedules. I've used some of your programming. My children have used it. But at the same time, I'm working from home. I'm anchoring in an entire show from home. And, it's hard to obviously keep children engaged, or sometimes it's just keeping them distracted through the time that I need to work. I had my son barge into my room today in the middle of a radio hit. And we as parents, I think many of us are probably putting pressure on ourselves to maintain some sort of structure, but also get our own work done. How much should we as parents be expecting our children to actually get out of this time?
So the first thing I tell the parents, and I'm in the same boat, I have 3 young kids at home, and they're coping to different levels, to different degrees. I tell parents, there's so much to think about right now. Just don't beat up on yourself. We're a week into this. We're going to figure this out together. If you want to get started, just focus on the basics at first. An hour of reading, an hour of math. We can help you there. We have book lists that we've published that can be helpful as well. That's a great start. And I've gotten reassurances from many homeschooling parents that as long as you really keep up to it and you keep consistency, the kids will also get adapted to it. That, especially for the very young kids, ages 5, 6, 7, it can be very hard. All of a sudden, your parent is trying to give you structure. Your parent's trying to do a job simultaneously. But I would say, don't beat up on yourself if you're a parent. Don't stress about it. Take one step at a time. To quote Frozen 2, do the next right thing. And then, depending on how long this closure situation goes, I think we can start to fall into patterns. But we are also doing things like daily live streams for advice for parents. We're doing parent webinars to help them get started and really disseminate information so other parents can say what worked for them.
Talk to us about what you're seeing globally, because you had seen kids coming back to school in Asia. Now, obviously, this crisis has spread to Europe and of course, in the United States. Are there any lessons that you're seeing happening elsewhere and learning from that others can take away?
Well, I mean, the clear thing that you're seeing more at the virus level is that, the social distancing is important to shut down things. But I don't think anyone's figured out the school closure situation. And, we're a relatively small not-for-profit. We're the budget of a large high school, but we reach over, before the crisis, 100 million students a year, and it might end up being multiple of that. We're saying, hey, we kind of have to step up here to fill a lot of this void that no one has quite figured out yet. We surveyed teachers over the weekend. It looks like half of them are in districts that had no virtualization plan or online learning plan. And then of the other half that did it, it's hit and miss. And so there's not a lot of guidance for teachers, students, and parents. So we see our role to step in. And we're seeing, last week on Monday, our traffic was up 60%, Tuesday up 80%, Wednesday up 100%. Thursday, 120%. So it's just continuing to accelerate. So we're just trying to do what we can. And I remind everyone, we are not for profit. And so our costs are going up, but our donations need to keep up with it. We're philanthropically supported.
So when the dust settles, and it will settle at some point, we just don't know when, what do you think the impact on the U.S. education system will be?
Yeah, that's a big question. And we don't know how long it will take for that dust to settle. I think if that dust settles in a matter of weeks, we won't see major structural changes. I think some of these things like internet access or computers at home are now going to be viewed as essentially a human right, especially if you have to be social distanced or your schools are closed. So I think that's a given. I think if we face a situation where schools close from now through the summer, and then even as we get to back to school, it's hit and miss. Maybe the virus picks back up in the fall once social society normalizes, in which case we might have to close schools again. I think then you're in a situation where districts and schools are going to have very clear virtualization plans. And I think those virtualization plans, they can't just be doing something completely different when schools are closed and something different when schools are open, because it might happen with a day's notice. So some element of the personalization online learning needs to be happening during the school year. And maybe it's 20% of the regular school year. But then when the schools have to get closed, then they can lean much more on that part of the solution while still creating ways for teachers and students to interact on things like video conferencing.